that our life we like to hold on to, our life we like to think it has this extreme value, and that it's like I'm most important, I'm the most deserving because of who I am. And then this guy named Jesus came in and he lived a perfect life without sin, without lying, without stealing, without cheating, without lusting, without hating. And then he died a death that he didn't deserve. And when he died that death, it gave us the ability to swap lives, switch lives. And that's what the beautiful exchange is that our lives, there's something wrong with our lives because of the fact that sin is in our lives. And so our life is like a paper clip. It's like one of these little paper clips right here. And God is saying, if you exchange your life with my son Jesus, it's like changing a paperclip for all the money in the entire world, right? And so, how silly would it be to hold on to this paperclip and say, no, I'm not going to grab all that money anymore because I really like my paperclip. And so that's what this series is on, is how God has given us this awesome gift of an exchange of our lives, like a paperclip, for Jesus' life, which is like even greater than all the wealth in the entire world. And we're on our second week on that. We're going to be talking about something that we can swap, something that we can trade, exchange with our attitudes. And so I'm extremely, extremely excited to talk to you guys about that. But first, I want to talk a little about this guy, or this being, not guy, God. Okay? God. And so I just have a couple questions, or I have a question for you guys. Who do you guys think God is? What are some attributes? Like, I'll give you guys first example. Like, God is love. God is love. Raise your hand and tell me what do you guys think, who God is, some attributes of Him, characteristics. God is giving. Good, yeah. Trustworthy. Yeah? He's holy. That's a great one. Yes. Faithful. Yeah.
Forgiving.
I say it again?
Forgiving.
All giving, is that what you said?
Forgiving.
Oh, forgiving. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear. Forgiving, that's right. Peaceful. Superior. That's a great one. God is superior. Say it again. Perfect. God is perfect. That's right. Here, I'm going to read to you guys a couple verses that describe God. Right? So this 1 Samuel 2:3. All these verses you can find in our Bibles, but I'm just going to read it to you real fast. 1 Samuel 2:3 says this: Boast no more, so very proudly. Do not let arrogance come out of your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge. So our God is a God of knowledge, and He's omniscient. He's all-knowing. He has all knowledge in the entire universe. Hebrews 4:13 says this, and there is no creature hidden from His sight. Talking about God. So God is not only all-knowledgeable, holy, glorious, awesome, but He is able to see everything. He's able to see everything. That's crazy. Psalm 27:1, the Lord is my light, God is light, and my salvation. God is salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. So God is all-knowing, omniscient, all-powerful. He's all-seeing. He's light. He's salvation. He's my defense. I mean, I picture kind of like a big shield that when something is being shot at me or fired at me, that He's able to protect me. Deuteronomy 4:24 says this: For the Lord your God is a consuming fire. Psalm 96:4 says this: For great is the Lord, and most worthy of praise. He's to be feared above all gods, but most worthy of praise. See, when you praise something, that means it has value. When you worship something, that means it has crazy value. Like, I don't go out and just worship this chair, right? I don't bow down and worship and pray to it, right? That'd be silly. I don't do that. Or I don't worship my friends just because they're just people. I don't worship that. But God, according to this, is all-knowing, all-powerful, almighty, glorious, majestic, amazing, and His value is so incredible that He deserves to be worshipped. He's worthy of worship. So this is God. Okay? This is who God is awesome. And then this God decides, I'm going to make something. Because I'm God, and I'm glorious, I'm magnificent, I'm awesome, I'm a consuming fire, I'm a salvation, I'm most worthy of praise. And so He starts to create something. And as we know, we read in Genesis, He created the universe. And He started creating, plants, animal, and light, and stars, and the oceans. And first off, that blows my mind. that he can create millions and billions and trillions of miles of space and fill it with tiny to him, but at the same time ginormous to us, things like planets. And then even ginormous things like oceans. And so the complexity of that is incredible. But then God does even more. He says, I'm not done. He, according to what we read, he took his characteristics, some of his characteristics, and he used that to make another creation. And as we read, we find out that he took some of himself to make human beings. And he says this is good. And we read that he actually breathed the breath of life into us. He made us and then he breathed life into us. And he did that by using some of his characteristics. So for instance, God is love, and we're able to love, right? So he used characteristics of himself to create and instill in us. But that doesn't mean that we have everything. Like, we're not all-powerful, all-knowing, omniscient, amazing, glorious. We don't deserve to be worshipped. But we have some of those characteristics, right? Like, for instance, it's kind of like the sun and the moon. See, the moon comes out, and it's not extremely bright like the sun, but it reflects the sun, right? It reflects the sun. And so the sun's brightness, its light, is ginormous. And the moon isn't, but however, it's because of the sun's light shining on the moon that then the moon reflects it. And that's actually our job as human beings, is not to reflect the sun, but to reflect God. Just like the moon reflects the sun, our job is to reflect our Creator. So God made us with characteristics like Him. We were made in the image of God, as Kenny told us last week. We're made in the image of God with characteristics like Him. And then it's our job to reflect that. That means wherever we go, we display this image of God. This image of a Creator, this image of the person or the being who made us. And then, as we also read, we mess that up. We mess it up, of course, because we mess up a lot of things. I mean, I mess up so many things, but as human beings, we read about Adam and Eve, they sinned, so then they messed up this perfection that God had made, and they allowed sin into their lives, which then blurs the image of God, because we're created to display God's characteristics, but when we display something like, let's say, lying, God does not lie. So when we lie, that's not displaying God. That's displaying our own humanity. And so we stopped reflecting God. And that's the problem, because that's not what we were created. We were created to reflect God. We're going against what we were created to do. And since we do this so poorly, I mean, I can think of a million times. We don't always reflect God. But for me, I think of when I was growing up in school, there was like these clubs, okay? There's these groups that you could join. They're like, they had like the art club and the math club and the soccer club or sports club in general, or, the Scrabble club, I never was in that one, or the chess club, and they had all these groups that you could be a part of, right? And it was based on what your abilities were, what your giftings were. And I remember for me, I was good enough to make it into the basketball club. It was really more like a team, but essentially that's what it was. It was a basketball team, basketball club, basketball group, and I was good enough to make that group, to make that club. And I was pretty proud of myself. So I played on there for a couple years, and then it came to a point where I was good enough to where I could be the captain, which meant that I was kind of in charge of that club and that group because of the fact that my abilities were good enough to make it to the top of that group. And then what it was with the captain, I remember, or I did. The captain's job, kind of what his role was that he also not only was one of the better players and one of the leaders, but he got to pick who played, and he also got to kind of pick at the beginning of the year who was in the group, who was on the team. And so as the captain, it was kind of part of my role to be able to watch players or other people that were trying out to get on this club and say, oh man, so bad. Oh my gosh, that person is horrific at basketball. That person is not making it into my club, right? They do not fit the standards to make it into my group. And then watch another player and be like, oh, they're not bad, but they can't dribble really well. They can shoot, I don't know. I'm critiquing them. I don't know, maybe. And then other players are like, whoa, that person meets my standards. They're good enough to make it into my group, right? And so that was my role as captain, was to kind of critique people and choose between the really, really bad players and the really, really good players and bring them into my group. And then I was thinking about this a little more. This is the way we live our lives in all aspects. We have clubs for everything. We have groups for everything. And in these groups, the main goal of them is to include the people that fit the standard, that fit what you're trying to find, but then everyone else, they don't get to fit in. They're not allowed in. Like, the people that were good at basketball, we're not allowed. We do this with everything. I mean, we do this with, starting as kids. We see the people we want to hang out with and we don't want to hang out with. Then in the middle school, we see the people who, have the coolest video games. We want to hang out with them. Who have the best, who's the prettiest, who's the funniest. And we start to find these people, and based on our standards, we want to hang out with them. We want them in our group. And we use a word for this sometimes, cliques. And we do this even into high school, into college, into when you're an adult. They have groups for everything. Like, for instance, they have a group for how pretty you are, and if you're too pretty, then you can't make it in. But if you're too ugly, you can't make it in. But then if you're just pretty enough, you can make it in this group, right? There's groups out there like that. There's groups out there like, same for weight, Well, they have groups for if you're too skinny, you can't make it in. But if you're too heavy, you can't make it in. You have to be right in the middle. Or if you're too in the middle, you have to be really, really skinny to make a group. Or they even have groups that if you're too skinny, you can't be in a group. Everything we see within movies, TV shows, school, everything is about getting into these groups, feeling accepted, feeling good. I made it. Yes, I made the basketball team. I made the soccer team. And then making sure that you can push as many people out as you can. It's like Joel was talking about the musical chairs. Sometimes life is like a big game of musical chairs, right? There's things you're trying to get into, and at the same time, you're wedging people out. And as you're pushing people out, they're pushing you out too. And it's this fight. Who can make it in? And it's based off of our standards. And then I realized something. You ready for this? Those groups, cliques, whatever you want to call them, anybody can make them. Anybody, whether you're 2 years old or 92 years old, you can make a group that's exclusive for whatever you want it to be. Your standards, if you're pretty enough, if you're smart enough, if you're good-looking enough, if you have the biggest muscles, or if you're the funniest or the smartest. And you can make a group like that. Whether you're 2 years old, 92 years old, or anywhere in between. You have the ability to make that. But there's one guy who's able to do something that nobody else has been able to do. He was able to make a group that wasn't like, oh, you can't come in because you're not pretty enough. You can't come in because you're not smart enough. You can't come in because you're not good enough. And I thought about it, I was like, is it more impressive to be like every single person on the world and be able to do something that everyone is able to do? Or is it more impressive to be able to make something, a group, that nobody else can make? Because it's all-inclusive. It's not a standard on how smart you are, how funny you are, how attractive you are. So we're going to read about this guy who started this. His name is Jesus. So open up your Bibles to this book called Mark. Okay? It's on page 545 is where we're reading from, okay? 545. Read about this guy named Jesus. And we're reading from the book of Mark. And Mark is one of the four Gospels, okay? Not 4. One of the four Gospels. And Mark has the shortest book of these four books. But yet, the way Mark describes things and the way he does things is incredible because he brings in details that the other books don't. And so we're going to pick up the story in chapter 5, verse 21, okay? Verse 21. Let me read it to you guys. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side of a lake, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Verse 22. Then came out of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, being Jesus, he fell at his feet. Okay? So let me read that again. Then came out of one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. Now, this word rulers shows that this guy named Jairus has power. He has power. He has wealth and he has power and he has ability because he's one of the rulers of the synagogue. And this time, these were the most important people. So he was a ruler of that. And Jairus, and seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet in 23 and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And Jesus, he went with him. So there's this guy who's pretty powerful, pretty wealthy, pretty amazing, and he finds Jesus amidst a bunch of these people, this crowd, and he comes up to Jesus and he falls on his knees and he says, "Jesus, please come because you have the power, because you are God, to save my daughter who is about to die. Please come." So Jesus looks at him and says, "I'll come." And so he goes with him. So as they're walking through the crowd to Jairus' home, there's a little ways away. It wasn't like a 5-minute walk. There's a little ways. As they're walking through the crowd, there's this woman in the crowd. Now, this woman was not wealthy. She was not powerful. She was not accepted. She actually had a disease. She had a sickness that caused her to be in a ton of pain, that caused her to spend a ton of money to try and fix it, but no doctors could fix it. And she spent all of her money, it says. So we're going to pick it up in verse 26. And she's in the crowd. And it says, "And who she had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but grew worse." Tons of pain. She had heard the reports about Jesus, and came up behind him in the crowd, and touched his garment. For she said, "If I touch even his garments, I will be made well." So this woman, not rich, not wealthy, not powerful, old, not accepted by people, rejected by people, unable to fix this disease, because at this time, if you had a sickness or disease, a lot of times you were not accepted by people because you were lower in ways. Came up to Jesus and touched his garments. And she was made well. She was immediately healed because she touched this powerful guy, Jesus, who was God. And then we'll pick it up in verse 30. And Jesus, perceiving in himself, that's pretty impressive, that power had gone out from him, he immediately turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments? I could feel the power leave me." And there was this argument back and forth with his disciples. People, I was like, "Nobody touched you." He's like, "Yes, it did." Jesus like, "Yes, I did. My power went out of me." And the woman was scared, so she came up to Jesus and fell at his feet and said this. Verse 34. She fell down before him and told him the whole truth, that she was trying to be healed. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Now, remember where Jesus was going when this happened. He was on his way to heal a girl of this rich, wealthy, powerful guy's daughter of his home. And he delays and stops for this woman who's rejected by people, who's not wealthy, not powerful, and he spends his time there talking to her to heal her. And so then it says in verse 35, while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And then verse 38, we'll jump there, it says, they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion. People were weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, I'm sorry, Talitha Kumi, which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And in verse 42 it says, and immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. They're immediately overcome with amazement. Okay, so let's take a step back first. Let me recap real quick. Jesus, he's teaching hundreds, thousands of people. They're watching him. A guy that's really powerful, famous probably, rich, wealthy, comes up and says, Jesus, help me, my daughter's going to die. Jesus says, of course I'll help you. They start walking towards his house, and then this woman, old, not wealthy, not powerful, rejected, not famous, touches his robe so that she's healed. And instead of Jesus looking at her and going, you're old, you're not very good looking, I mean, so many people already try to help you, and you're not wealthy, you're not powerful. This guy's way more important. Okay. And walks to Jairus' house. He takes his time to stop while he knows the girl is about to die, and people are probably freaking out because she's about to die, and he stops and talks to this old, rejected, disease, sickness-filled woman. And he communicates with her and encourages her and forgives her of her sins and loves her. While there was this little girl that was probably pretty wealthy, that was the daughter of a famous, powerful man who was about to die. That is Jesus. And then you know what's even cooler? Is that he doesn't just find someone that's rejected, that nobody else cares about, and takes time for them. He continues to move on to even the powerful, the famous, the rich. That's the way Jesus works. He works in a way that he sees the people that nobody else saw. See, I think of Peter and a couple of others, his disciples. Peter was one of Jesus' disciples that followed around everywhere. He was a fisherman, which meant that in the night he would go out on a boat into the water, and he would spend all night sweating and fishing and getting dirty. And he'd spend all night doing that, and he'd get up and he'd get back to the shore, and he'd sell his fish, and he'd smell like fish, and he'd be sweaty, and he'd be nasty. And then after he finished that, he'd probably sleep, and then the next night he'd wake up and he'd go out and do that again. At this time, fishermen were so little valued. So little valued. You know what Jesus did? He looked at that fisherman who was so little valued, he said, I find value in you. Come and follow me. Come and be my friend. Come and be my disciple. I think of Zacchaeus or Matthew. They were both tax collectors, and they were against their own people. So imagine you had your group at school, okay? You had a group of maybe 4 or 5 friends, right? And you guys love to hang out. You love to eat lunch together. You love to cause a little bit of trouble together. Not too much trouble, just have fun, you know? You played at PE, you played the same sport together. And then one of those friends decides, okay, every time that my group of 5 friends starts to do something that they can get in trouble for, I'm going to run to the teacher, tell the teacher will come back, get them in trouble, they'll be in detention, they'll get bad grades, and they'll be in trouble. Imagine if one of your friends did that. That's what Zacchaeus and Matthew were like, but on a higher level. They would have their group of, their whole entire people that they lived with, and then these people came in and said, hey, if you spy on your people and you charge them money, okay, to give to us, because we're ruling over them, then we'll give you extra money. And guess what? Jesus found these people who were hated and despised because they were jerks. And he said, I want to get to know you. I want to have lunch with you. I'm coming over to your house to hang out with you. Or come and follow me. Or even think of someone like David. David, who we've read about, was this 12, 13-year-old boy. He was a shepherd. He was a shepherd. He watched sheep all his life. And God used him to become a king and defeat giants. The God that is holy, majestic, awesome, what do we say? Knowledgeable, all-seeing, light, most worthy of praise. That God, he seeks and finds people that other people reject. He seeks and finds people that other people critique and say, you don't meet my standards. You're not good enough to make it into my group. And then not only does he invite those people that are not good enough to make it in the other groups into his group, but then he goes to those other groups that are rejecting people and he says, hey, I want you in my group as well. That's who Jesus was. See, Jesus lived a counter-cultural life. He lived a life that was so different from everybody else that people would look at him and go, what are you doing? You're talking to a tax collector? You're talking to a fisherman? Why would you do that? And Jesus was like, and do it because I love them. And do it because my group isn't exclusive based on your standards. I found this out with basketball. I critique people based on how good they were by my standards. How good they were on the outside. Could they dribble? Could they shoot? And we do that in all aspects. But God, He judges based on your character, based on your heart. Not based on how pretty you are, based on how funny you are, how smart you are, how attractive you are, how athletic you are. He is there to critique the heart. He has time for the people that nobody else has time for. And He wants us to exchange, to swap our attitude